Hi, today I have a couple of electric 12-string guitars to show you. A Rickenbacker 370-12 in maple glow finish and a Gibson ES335 in vintage cherry. I think if you're going to have a 335 it has to be vintage cherry. Well, maybe that's not true, but they look good. But before I give you a demonstration of what they sound like, let me describe their similarities and their differences. First, the similarities. They're both made in USA. They both have 12 strings. They both have a 24 3/4 inch scale length. They both have rosewood fingerboards, and both have glued-in necks, and both are semi-hollow. Now the differences. Well, let's start with the body and the neck. The Rickenbacker, apart from the fretboard, is all maple construction. The body is created by shaping and hollowing out a solid piece of maple. And then the back, which is also a solid piece, is glued to the back and then bound. And there's also binding on the fretboard as well, or the side of the neck. Even though you can see this dark stripe here on the back of the neck and also on the headstock, that's actually maple as well. It's just been treated in a way to make it that colour. The Gibson 335 12-string has a mahogany neck and a mahogany centre block under the pickups, but the front, sides and back of this guitar are all made of a sandwich of maple, poplar and maple. Okay, what about string order? That's one thing where these two guitars differ. The Gibson has the traditional ordering of the strings with respect to most 12 strings. If you do a downstroke on the Gibson, you will hit the octave string first and then the normal pitch strings, normal in relation to a 6-string guitar. The Rickenbacker, on the other hand, has it the other way around. So the first string you would hit is the normal pitch string and then the octave string after that. So that's a significant difference between these two instruments. One particular review that I saw recently of another 360 12-string, I think that particular one was. This person had done some modifications on it. He had changed the nut and swapped all the saddles around on the bridge so that he then could have the strings in the same order as a conventional 12-string. And it was his opinion that that made it actually easier to play without muting adjacent strings, and that's certainly one of the issues that I have with this particular 12-string guitar. It's very difficult to play it without muting adjacent strings, at least with my big fingers anyway. Okay, neck width. The Rickenbacker's neck is 1 5/8 of an inch at the nut, which is 41.4 millimeters. And that's the same as what's on my 6-string version of this particular style of guitar as well. So maybe that's part of the reason why it's also difficult to play without muting adjacent strings. The Gibson's neck is 1 3/4 inches, that's 44.45 millimeters at the nut, and those extra 3 millimeters do certainly make a difference with respect to the ease of playing this instrument. It's much easier to play it without muting adjacent strings with your fingers. Okay, so next thing is the fingerboard. Well, the fingerboard on both of these instruments is made of rosewood. The main difference is this one is lacquered, the Rickenbacker's is lacquered, the Gibson's is not, and there's also a couple of extra frets on the Rickenbacker, so that one has 24 frets and the Gibson only has 22. The bridges on these two instruments I've had actually replaced. Originally they both came with 6 saddle bridges, but I've had 12 saddle bridges fitted by a local luthier. The main reason was I'm a real stickler for things playing in tune, and when I bought this particular instrument. The intonation was pretty good, but it wasn't perfect, particularly on the lower strings. Between the octave string and the normal pitched one, as you went up the fretboard, they got progressively out of tune from one another. So I found a company in Germany that actually makes bridges. I think it's APM or ABM, and that actually just slots straight over the posts for a tunematic bridge. So this is now, as the luthier claimed, one of the most in-tune 12-string guitars you'll ever find. So I actually did that on the Gibson first, and then because I bought this after I had the Gibson, I then got the same luthier to install a genuine Rickenbacker 12-saddle bridge on this particular instrument. So this one plays pretty well in tune now too. Okay, what about the headstock? Well, the Gibson's is fairly traditional in its layout with 2 rows of 6, and the machine heads are mini Grovers, being slightly smaller than the conventional or older style. That means they've been able to put them a little bit closer together, so the headstock is perhaps not as long as it might have otherwise been. Rickenbacker have a fairly unique way of doing their 12 strings, which on the face of it looks pretty neat. These are shallow machine heads, also mini ones too, I think. But as you can see, they have 6 in the conventional way and 6 in between those in a similar way that you might have on a classical guitar. It makes for a nice compact headstock, but I have my doubts as to its practicability or practicality. Some of the Rickenbacker headstocks have the routed area going all the way through. This one doesn't. I suspect the ones with it all the way through might be a little easier to string. This one I'm not looking forward to the day when I have to restring it. I haven't actually done that myself yet. The other thing about this particular instrument, with respect to the strings that go through onto these machine heads that have the poles going that way, the strings touch, some of the strings touch the timber or the covers over the truss rods, and of course that means they get a bit stuck when you're tuning them. So I think that's a little bit of a design flaw. It's a nice idea having it so compact like that, but I don't think it's as practical as it might otherwise be. Okay, what are we up to now? Pickups. Well, the pickups on the Gibson are a burstbucker 1 in the neck position and a burstbucker 2 in the bridge position. But there is a little bit of electronic trickery as well. By pulling up the volume knobs, you get to tap the pickups. So it becomes a single coil pickup, and that gives you a little bit more of an open tone, slightly more along the lines of what the Rickenbacker has. So there's a fair bit of variation in this particular guitar. You can have one tapped and one not. One thing I do find, when you tap the pickups, it does reduce the output a bit. Certainly noticeable. And the controls, of course, are the traditional way that Gibson do it. That's the volume control for the neck pickup, that's the volume control for the bridge pickup, and the tone for the neck, tone for the bridge. And of course the toggle switch to switch between them. The Rickenbacker, they actually do their controls in the opposite way, but first of all the pickups, these are what they call their toaster pickups. They're a single coil pickup, fairly low output. On the newer style of guitars, they have what they call their high gain pickups. High gain from a Rickenbacker point of view, probably not high gain from a Gibson point of view, but anyhow. These give a really jangly tone, which I'll demonstrate later. The layout of the controls is different to the Gibson. That's the volume for the neck pickup, that's the volume for the bridge pickup, and this little one here is the volume for the middle pickup. That's the tone for the neck pickup, and that's the tone for the two combined, pretty sure. Another difference in these two guitars is the outputs. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the Rickenbacker has two output options, a standard mono output and what they call Rico sound, which is a stereo output. And on this particular guitar, what you get, if you use a stereo phono plug or a tip ring sleeve phono, 1/4 inch phono, you get the neck pickup out the tip and the bridge and the middle pickups out the sleeve. So I use a Y cable that goes from a stereo phono plug to two monos if I want to record this in stereo. The Gibson, on the other hand, only has a mono output. I think that's about all. I'm just going to now plug them into my Fender 59 Bassman reissue. I've got all the tone controls flat and just a little bit of presence. The presence is on about 3. The flat being about 6.5. It goes from 1, I think, to 12 or thereabouts. And the volume not too loud because we're only in a small room. So let's start, seeing as this one's plugged in. We'll start with the Gibson. Now I'm just going through my pedal board, but the only thing I've got turned on is a TC Electronic Hall of Fame, just to give it a bit of reverb because there's no effects in this particular amplifier. In the middle position. That's with the tones all on 10. So let's go now the Ricky neck pickup. Pickups. With the middle one as well, turned up. The bridge pickup by itself. How about with a bit of overdrive? That was all 3 pickups. Now just the back pickup. what these two instruments sound like. Thanks for watching.